Hi guys, welcome back. Today I want to talk about something that might be a little bit different from the usual content you get from me on my channel. I am not going to talk about books. I am going to talk about my experience doing my PhD. I've been trying to plan this video for quite a while. I have been struggling a bit into pinpointing how I felt and pinpointing kind of a general feeling about what the experience brought to me and meant to me. And I've decided to kind of distill all these thoughts and feelings into 8 different tips. I finished my PhD last December and I did my PhD in life sciences. So your experience might be a little bit different depending on which subject you're studying for your PhD. But I know enough people who are researching other things than my topic and who have run into similar problems or similar experiences. So I try to keep this as general as possible. And again, I would love to know if you had a different experience coming from a different area of research. Let me know down below. So let's get straight into it. My first tip would be to find a place/topic that you're really passionate about. And that sounds completely logical, but it might not always be. You might want to be in a specific place to do your PhD because of your surroundings or families or friends or whatever. And it can be very different from person to person which of these criteria are the most important, the topic you're researching or the place you're doing so. But I really recommend that you find whichever is the most important or find a good compromise between both and go somewhere that really makes you passionate, because you have to remember that this is somewhere you will be and you will be researching for a long time. And you still have to be very passionate about where you're doing your research, in which environment, at which university, in which topic, on the long run. And this has to withstand the setbacks that naturally occur and has to outweigh them. Number 2 is don't underestimate the energy you will need to do your PhD. I think it is broadly known that doing a PhD is not the easiest thing, right? But I think sometimes even we ourselves are not really aware of how much it will take from us, from our time, our mental energy, on money, depending on where you are and how much you have to pay for it, and also responsibilities. My tip number 3 is find allies. Wherever you are, you will be surrounded by colleagues and or friends, and it is important to have a support system. May it be a colleague that you get along really well, or maybe a mentor, or even go online and look for PhD student networks. For example, there's one on Twitter that I can link down below. Maybe there's even a PhD student association at your university. And it's really important to find people that can help you and back you up. And it's actually really wonderful, because when you find a group of people, or you find people that are like that for you, you can also be that to them. And it can lead to really wonderful working relationships and even friendships. Tip number 4 is one that I wish I could have told myself from time to time, and that is know your worth. I think academic research can be a treacherous place sometimes, and you can often feel anonymous or not feel like you're making a real contribution in your field. You can also feel really isolated, and in some places there can even be competition between PhD students or exploitation of students and their energy. And that's why I think it's really important to remind yourself, but also surround yourself with people who remind you that you are actually making a contribution to your field. You are doing something, you're getting up every day and you're doing something, and it's worth it. My tip number 5 is actually directly related to the previous one, and that is ask for help if you need it. It is now actually common knowledge, and there's enough research and statistical data about it, that a PhD is very, very hard on mental health. And I think that if you are in a place where you feel stuck, you have the right to ask for help. You can ask for professional help, or you can look for a counseling service at your university. And in case it is needed, there are also structures at universities built specifically to address cases of conflicts or mistreatment. These topics and the problems that are really prevalent in academia are not talked about enough, and I think only something can happen if we do something about it and report when things are happening for the whole structure to change someday. The next thing that I learned is PhD is not your entire life. Doing a PhD can be, as I said, a very isolating process, and we are often plunged very deep into a specific topic in which we become absolute experts in a very niche way. And sometimes this can really drag you down a rabbit hole, literally. And it can be hard to get out of it and remind yourself that you were also a person with other parts of you, other facets, and it hasn't disappeared just because you're doing a PhD, and it hasn't disappeared just because the PhD work and all the energy you're putting into it has taken up so much of your life, as it often does for PhD students. My advice is kind of obvious, but still I feel like I had to remind it to myself on many occasions, is to talk with people who are not doing a PhD. Talk to your friends, your family. That this contact with other people or outsider people who might not specifically know what you're going through as a PhD student can be tiring, but they're just the thing that really keeps you sane. If you are a person who likes physical activity, make sure that you plan specific moments in your week where you commit to doing sports. And if you're doing a team sport, it's even better, because you get to talk with people who enjoy the same activity as you do, and they might not necessarily be doing a PhD. If you are a crafty person, plan alone times for you and your craft. If you are knitting or sewing or drawing or video editing, whatever you're doing, make sure that you don't lose it completely in the process of doing your PhD. Tip number 7 is also one that I think is very difficult for us to remind it to ourselves, and that is be kind to yourself. The first point in that is to make sure you have time for yourself where you're not doing your PhD. And that relates back to some of the ideas I mentioned in the previous point. But another way to be kind to yourself is to remind yourself why you're doing this PhD in the first place. There is always some spark that sets this idea of going and delving deep into a specific subject that you're passionate about. And sometimes through doing the whole thing and feeling exhausted, and sometimes even feeling like you're not being acknowledged for it, can make you lose sight of why you were doing it in the first place. So remind yourself why you're doing this, because if you're doing this, you are obviously really passionate about it, and there was a reason why you're doing it. And the other thing is to remind yourself and be kind to yourself about the fact that doing a PhD is a marathon. And it's sometimes hard to acknowledge to oneself that there are some days where it's going to be really bad, and there are going to be days where it's going to be super great, and that is okay. And therefore, the days where things are not going great, to be kind to yourself about it, and the days where things are going great, to really celebrate it. My last point also relates to the previous one, and it is be kind to others. As I also already mentioned before, academia and academic research can be a rough place, to say the least. And very likely, the people who are going through that alongside you are experiencing the same things as you do. And I feel like we have also a certain part of responsibility to have each other's backs, and that implies keeping your eyes and ears open and at least try to speak up about things that are happening if they're unjust in any way. And to break this infernal circle of treating people in a certain way, and it might be not such a good way, just because you've been treated the same way. I think that can be a very toxic way of working with each other, and that the whole field of academia and the problems and the pitfalls that it has could be remedied if we actually listen to each other and would be more open about the problems that we encounter. Alright guys, these were the somewhat scattered thoughts / tips / things I learned during my PhD. I hope this was helpful, and let's continue this conversation, which I think is a very important one. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!